the Royal Blue podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Royal Blue podcast. A little longer than usual. We are aware that we weren't able to fit one in since the busy festive schedule kicked in, but it has been a very busy one. Everyone's spending time. We do actually give people time off here. Yeah, apparently so.
Things have changed.
Travelling to games and people's days off just haven't really lined up. So we are sorry that we haven't been back sooner, but we are here, and we are here in not the circumstances we want to be. I'm your host, Sam Carroll, today, filling in for Phil Kirkbride, and I'm alongside Dave Prentice, Adam Jones and Chris Beesley, and we will be chewing the fat, as Phil has told me I'm legally required to say, over that dismal defeat at Anfield yesterday. Adam, I'll start with you because you were there. Was you there as well, pal? I'm just going to ignore
Unfortunately, I was.
Yeah. Adam, you were covering the game for us yesterday. Talk us through how you're feeling today.
Not much better, to be honest. It's still... It was just a chastening experience for anybody of a blue persuasion who was in Anfield yesterday. It was one of them where you, as soon as you saw the team news, like you were thinking to yourself, oh, well, Everton should be winning this by a decent margin, but then there's that little voice in the back of your mind that's thinking to yourself, it still is Everton at Anfield though, isn't it? Like, yeah. This could still go wrong, but I don't think anybody, in their heart of hearts really expected it to go as wrong as it did. And, it shouldn't have gone as wrong as it did. Everton had some really good chances in that first half. That Mason Holgate header, he should be burying that. That's the biggest chance, in my opinion, that we missed. But, Calvert-Lewin missed a decent opportunity. Richarlison hit one straight at Adrian. There was, that one right at the end of the half where Theo Walcott messed up the pass to Richarlison, which should have done better. And then, but when you're thinking to yourself, right, second half, they'll really kick on and really take it to this young Liverpool team. It was the complete opposite. Like, Liverpool just came out with all the energy, all the desire, all the belief that they could go on and win that game. And, we had a team out there that had 9 internationals on the pitch. They had a team that had, 4 or 5 teenagers, I think. One of them was 16 years old, and he ran Luca Dean ragged in the second half. It's absolutely embarrassing, shambolic, spineless. You can call it what you want, to be honest. And I think the fact that, most of them went straight down the tunnel at the end of the game shows the kind of mentality that was on display throughout the 90 minutes. That's just absolutely not acceptable for anybody who was putting on that famous club crest yesterday, and they should all be embarrassed of how they represented not just themselves, but how they represented the club as well.
Similar sentiment from you, Preno?
Just listening to all that and echoing it entirely and trying to be a little bit more dispassionate, if I can be, about what happened there. But it's the worst I've seen. And 1976 was the first one, when it was an 11:30 kickoff at Anfield when David Fairclough scored like that wonder goal. And I'm not ashamed to say I went home in tears that day. Didn't cry yesterday, but God, I felt sick inside because it was just so you can pick any word you like, but it was just like so appalling. First half performance was okay, and like you say, chances were created. Well, I say created, they were largely gifted to us by some poor Liverpool defending. But that second half performance was just so lacking in character and lacking in spirit and lacking in any kind of drive. And to say that about a derby match is quite appalling. And you feel for the supporters so badly. They've seen so many awful experiences at Anfield, and for me that was the worst. The team selection probably contributed, the Liverpool team selection, that fragile mindset we've got to go into Anfield. I think when that team sheet dropped, rather than a great kids, let's get into these, let's sort of give them a good kick and give them a good hiding, it was like, oh wow, what if we get beat by this gang of kids? That's going to be the worst yet. That kind of mindset seemed to prevail rather than, so let's get about them and try and intimidate them. And that's got to change. The personnel have got to change. An awful lot of players that were on duty yesterday did themselves no favours whatsoever with Carlo Ancelotti. He will have learned a lot about them straight away. But a mindset's got to change as well. And, he's the right manager to change that mindset. But, God, he's going to have a lot of work to do over the next few months.
Because from the first... Everton had chances in that first half, but it just kind of felt like some players were struggling with the basics yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah. When they go to Anfield, it's like a mental block, and it shouldn't be like that at all. they've been under several different managers. This particular group of players, you can't blame. When the record goes back 20 years, you can't blame it on one group of players because it's various different teams. But like we said, when that Liverpool team sheet came out, it should have been, this is the chance now. 20 odd years, this is the opportunity to go and win there, and they just it's the worst one yet, because whether it's last minute winners, whether it's getting thrashed there, whether it's conceding freak goals, it's like there's no end to their creativity and to go lower and lower and worse in a way to lose a derby match. And so they basically lost to Liverpool's second team, and people are making much play, quite rightly so, of this old Shankly remark, the two great teams in Liverpool and Liverpool reserves. And let's get it right, when Bill Shankly said that was at a time, I mean, they brought out last week, very interesting, the all-time league table and how that has evolved over 100 years. I mean, Shankly was great for coming out for these quotes. Certainly Liverpool fans would think that. But at that time when Shankly probably made that remark, Everton would have been top of the all-time league table. We also had another graphic came out recently we've used on our Echo site. Everton were actually ahead on the all-time derby head-to-head until I think about 1980, something like that. So to be in this position now where every time they go to Anfield and have this inferiority complex, it's just ridiculous. This isn't... Everton aren't Espanyol to Liverpool's Barcelona. This is a team who for over a century were in the ascendancy. So what's gone on over this last generation, it's just ridiculous.
Preno, for someone who's seen those Everton teams win at Anfield and seen Everton teams win the league ahead of Liverpool, though, where do you think it starts for Carlo Ancelotti to fix it? Is it as easy as buying and selling players like some might hope?
I got a message last night from an Everton legend who I'm not going to embarrass, but who just said recruitment over and over again, and suggested it started when David Moyes left the club and Roberto Martinez tried to augment a team that had finished sixth with 4 players signed from a team that had just been relegated, of which only one, James McCarthy, you could argue was a success. The others weren't, and it's got to come down to the players. The players just weren't good enough. They weren't spirited enough. Again, trying to be dispassionate and trying to be a little bit more logical about it. And the team selection didn't help in that 9 of those starting 11 played at Man City on New Year's Day, so they only had like 4 days to recover. They looked laboured, they looked leg weary, they looked so a little bit leggy. Whereas Liverpool were fizzing the ball around, the players looked fresh, they looked sharper, so that contributed. But the greater experience, the greater sort of character those players should have been more than enough to counter that. And we just didn't see it. I mean, 1 yellow card for pulling a shirt. I'm not saying they should have gone round, trying to 2-foot the kids. But, equally, they've got to try and show a little bit more aggression, intensity, enough to try and, sort of get possession of the ball, which they didn't have. They sort of gifted possession of the ball to, a gang of kids. The players have to hold the responsibility for that. There weren't enough players there that I felt cared that much about it, and you see that at the final whistle, and it was probably a wise decision not to go over to the fans the way they'd have been feeling, but it was just one play went over to the fans at the final whistle. That's poor. I wonder how many of those players were hurting, really badly afterwards. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't in the tunnel. I don't know if you went down afterwards, Adam, but I suspect they wouldn't have said a great deal, but just the body language from some of them makes you think that this really doesn't get to them as much. Seamus Coleman's one that clearly you wouldn't, point that towards as a man who wears his heart on his sleeve, but he was taken off, which was a surprising decision for me. And that left a number of players out there that didn't seem to be hurting enough. To be going into the last quarter of an hour of a game like that and not even having like a cavalry charge or, so putting the ball into the box and trying to make things happen, it just left you feeling really flat and really disappointing. So, the players have to hold the responsibility. You can't criticise Carlo Ancelotti. He's been there 5 minutes and has already made a decent impression. So it has to be the players that, to hold the responsibility.
I think the main problem for me, like in terms of, they should have had this sort of fight and desire and passion because 9 of them started that game against Chelsea last month where they showed consummate amounts of it. That was one of our biggest battling performances of the season. And there was just absolutely no semblance of that whatsoever at Anfield. Like, how can they change so drastically in such a short space of time to put in such diametrically opposite performances? I just don't understand how it is. And you say that 9 of them started against Man City as well. Yeah, maybe, but they can't be putting in a performance that lacks so much belief and fight.
Yeah.
You know, if you're tired, you're tired. But
And there's 4 days, to be fair. It wasn't like, sort of 2 days, 3 days. 4 days should be sufficient, to recover your freshness and your zest.
They put in 2 performances within 3 days of each other, in Boxing Day and against Newcastle.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's a bit different opposition than going to Anfield, but putting in 2 performances with loads of fight in 3 days, why couldn't they have just done the same for this one? I just don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, the character. Those teams in the late 90s, I think they only finished in the top half once, but I mean, they won at Anfield, and then obviously Walter Smith's side at last won in Anfield '99. They weren't a great Everton side. They would have finished the bottom half of the table that season, but they had the character. If they were that age now, they'd have gone and won yesterday. It was just totally ridiculous, and it's probably similar sort of side to decide, which was knocked out the FA Cup last season at Millwall. Again, Marco Silva, to his credit, played a full-strength team at Millwall and got turned over by a team towards the bottom end of the Championship. So it goes down as another great FA Cup shock, the fact that Liverpool's kids have gone and stunned Everton's first team.
You talk about making impressions on Carlo Ancelotti, Preno, and 2 people who seemingly, from the reaction from supporters today, certainly online, haven't, is Gylfi Sigurdsson and Morgan Schneiderlin. Where do you think their Everton futures lie after that showing?
Both very, very different, I think. I mean, Morgan Schneiderlin, I've said in this room many times that I query his attitude. And, sometimes you'll get 2 or 3 really good games from him and you think, great, this is the kind of holding central midfielder we need. Then he'll go missing on a couple of occasions. Yesterday, a little bit of sympathy. He'd come in after having several weeks out injured, so he was off the pace a little bit. But he's not the future. He's not the long-term, solution for Everton. Gylfi Sigurdsson is an enormous talent and does have, creativity, but he's never going to be a central midfielder as long as he's got a hole in his backside. And he's got to play somewhere else. He's got to be either behind the striker. And can we afford to do that? There are probably better players in the squad capable of doing that role. If we play 4-4-2, he can't do that anyway. Does he play off the left? Again, maybe not. There are other players that can do that. So, regrettably, because I like him, I think he's a talented footballer, I just don't see where he fits into the squad. And so I think it could be elsewhere. I think, whether they can find somebody to actually, sort of pay a transfer fee for him at his age now, and given the huge, sum that we spent on him, I don't know. It's a difficult one to say, and I don't like to say that because, like I say, I like him as a footballer. He scores goals, he makes things happen, but you can't do it from central midfield, and I just don't see where he fits in.
Is it surprising to see what's happened to Sigurdsson this season, Adam, when you kind of remember he was a crucial player last season and scored 13 goals, and it felt like Marco Silva had really unlocked a way to get the best out of him?
It's so strange to me that, such, what would seem to us like such a slight change of position has drastically changed Sigurdsson's form, because as Preno said, last season we were seeing a player who was, not just creating chances for other people, but was getting into the box and scoring goals. I think last season as well, the amount of times we'll have sat around this table and said, Gylfi Sigurdsson's the one who works hardest, and he's always everywhere, he's running about. But this season, I can't remember ever seeing that sort of performance from Sigurdsson. Especially not at Anfield there. I thought he looked slow, he looked leggy. Don't think he put the required amount of effort in. And it's not as if he was getting turned over by the greatest midfielders in the world. It was Adam Lallana and Pedro Chiravella. We've got 2 experienced international midfielders in there against and one of their more experienced players on the day, and a youngster who's hardly had a game for the first team in however many years. It is just strange to me that Sigurdsson can seemingly only play in that number 10 role, because he does have the qualities that you'd think would be able to translate to a central midfield role. His passing range usually is fantastic. He picks up the ball in spaces and he advances us up the pitch. That's what we needed from him in yesterday's game, and he just couldn't do it. It's strange to me, and if we were going to be, I don't think a 4-2-3-1 is necessarily what Ancelotti wants to play. Even if he was to play that, and Alex Iwobi is fit. I'd argue Alex Iwobi fits into the number 10 role a little bit better than Sigurdsson in the current crop of players. So, like, as probably agree with Preno, you're just starting to wonder if Gylfi Sigurdsson can't find his form soon or reinvent himself into a different role soon, then you just wonder where he's going to fit in this squad in the long term.
Is that the problem now, B, is that, you know, when you look at that entire 18 named yesterday, there's a lot of players in that team, isn't there, that you could potentially question, do they have a future for where Everton and where Carlo Ancelotti want to be?
Yeah, I think that's the big problem, is offloading, and people in the heat in the moment yesterday come out with ridiculous statements like, you know, get rid of the lot or whatever, and you know, that even worse one, let them rot in the reserves, which is, I don't think it ever happens ever. But yeah, you just can't offload these players. It's easier said than done. I mean, we look at people like Cuco Martina and Umar Nias, who have been surplus to requirements for a long time now, both still on the books. And it goes to the same for these first team players, whether it's somebody like Gylfi Sigurdsson, another one the wrong side of 30 in Theo Walcott. It's going to be difficult to get takers given that the huge contracts that they're on at Everton. Just going back to Sigurdsson a second, I think what I would say, he's a player of spectacular moments, but when those spectacular moments dry up, you're in trouble. Very different sort of player to Tim Cahill, but in that they're silk and steel. But as two attacking midfielders, they were similar in that they would always have a good goal output without necessarily offering a great deal in other areas. But once those goals dry up, which you've done with Gylfi, which in spectacular fashion has gone from joint top scorer last season to, hardly getting a kick this year, apart from when he was a bit angry and he came on against West Ham. But it's going to be difficult though, just to get rid of them, even if you're losing them for next to nothing in return in terms of transfer fees. Just having somebody prepared to take those big wages off the books.
You mentioned before, Preno, about the Djibril Sidibe being the only Everton player to go over to the travelling support at the end, and Gylfi Sigurdsson spoke a little bit about that today, and he kind of admitted it was a little unusual, but kind of said players have a different way of reacting to things, and the lads were all just so gutted. But what do you make of only one player, and that being an on-loan player, going over to 8,000 Evertonians after a derby defeat?
Deeply disappointing. I think it's got to be an obligation, so to go over there. I always think of the Wembley one where Sylvain Distin, committed that absolute howler and that cost us the game, but then went over afterwards almost like with an act of contrition, so trying to apologise to them. And it was an act that was largely accepted by the majority of fans that were there because they appreciated, all right, you didn't mean to do it, but, it was an error. And he was sorry about it, and he held his hand up. It's almost like they were absolving their responsibilities by not wanting to go over because they were probably aware of the reaction that they would have got. Although, I mean, I didn't hang around. I went straight down into the press room afterwards. And I think you said that myself, didn't you, that he got quite a decent reception from the fans that went over.
Yes, got a good amount of applause from what I
saw. So, whatever fears that the players might have had, were unjustified. But should you be fearing getting a bit of flack over having put on a performance like that? You should have been going over there to apologise for it. And again, that hints at a lack of character, so a lack of personality amongst a number of players, which again is so disappointing, and hints that again, players need to be changed. If you haven't got enough leaders, and we've said it many times in here, how many times has the captain's armband been switched around this season? There are no obvious leaders in that squad. Seamus Coleman, isn't an obvious captain, and yet he's the one that seems most suited to it at the moment. Tom Davis, for me, is far too young to be carrying that armband, although he does carry it with distinction when he does wear it. But Sigurdsson, well, we've said enough about him, so he should never be a captain of the football club. More leaders are needed. Yerry Mina could become that leader in time, but, he's still relatively new to the football club. But it does suggest that, changes are needed, and lots of them.
Wasn't Fabian Delph brought in that respect, wasn't it, to have a vocal character within the dressing room? But unfortunately for him, he's been in and out. It's been so stop-start for him with the injuries.
Was you surprised to see only Sidibe over there, Adam?
Yeah. I was expecting a few more. Mason Holgate did, half-heartedly. He stood a bit closer to the halfway line, and he gave the fans there a round of applause. But he stood a lot further back from where Sidibe walked up to. There was some suggestion that Jordan Pickford might have gave the fans a bit of applause as well, but he was already down that end of the pitch when the match ended anyway, so I might have personally missed that one. But yeah, I think a few others should have been over, and I think it's the bare minimum that those fans deserved was, some sort of recognition from the players that were on the pitch of, the fantastic support again that they gave. 8,000 fans coming over for a derby. That's an incredible amount of support. And the one thing that stayed constant over these raft of changes over the last few years is the Everton support home and away has always just been fantastic. And it just didn't seem like the fans got the credit that they deserved after that game. And it just, it hints at a divide between the fan base and the current squad, which you just can't allow to happen. Some of the most successful times in Everton's history, it's because the fans have felt such a connection with the squad that we do feel like one club and one big entity. And I'd argue we just don't feel like that at the minute. And, that's a part of the task that, Carlo Ancelotti's going to face, of course, but Mashiri will face, Marcel Brands will face. Fingers crossed, the new stadium will help, kind of unify that. But you'd like to think that things would be fixed long before we're in Bramley Moor. So, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
I saw a few comments on social media last night from fans, basically, quite reasonable fans as well, not, the usual knee-jerk, types, basically saying they're thinking twice about going to the game on Saturday against Brighton. Because I know that's not the reaction you want. You want to see, a reaction from the fans as much as you do from the players. But because they're so disillusioned by what they saw, it's almost like, well, if they can't be bothered, sort of putting in a shift for us, why should we be bothered putting in a shift for them? And it's dangerous when it gets like that. There's got to try and be some kind of reaction from both sides. I wondered if we'll have the siren at the weekend, so is it required, for a game like that? But it's an important little spell coming up now. Because after the initial uplift of Carlo Ancelotti's arrival, that was such a dispiriting downturn, and it needs to be reversed very, very quickly because we're still, so a bit too close to the bottom of the table for comfort.
Well, they can't be passing the buck anymore, can they? No. Last month's derby defeat did kind of fall on the shoulders of Marco Silva, as you would have expected, but this time around, there's no under fire manager that they can sort of hide behind. We are in the middle of a January transfer window, but over the next couple of weeks, there's only so much business that would ever be done. The majority of this squad are going to be here up until the end of the season at the very least. They need to stand up over the next couple of weeks and take responsibility and prove to these Everton fans that they deserve to be wearing that badge, because they can't be putting in performances like that. Everton fans won't accept it.
So moving on then, and Bees will come to you, nicely segued by Adam, but it's our first podcast since the January transfer window open. What do you think needs to be addressed immediately? What do Everton need between now and the end of the season to at least start pushing away and more to the top half of the table?
Yeah. Well, as we saw with yesterday's display, central midfield is still a big concern, but it's a strange one in that maybe it'd be scope for loan signings possibly, because obviously you've got Jean-Philippe Gabin, whose Everton career almost, hadn't really got started, and he got injured, so you still got him to come back, hopefully. And then Andre Gomez next season, if not this season. So I certainly think somewhere in the centre of the park, but whether that's a permanent signing or whether that's a long signing, I don't know. And then obviously centre-back, where they've been carrying just 3 players all season, so they went into the season to play a light in that department, could do some reinforcements there. Depending on who's available, always a right winger, someone a bit of quality on that side of the park. But again, might be a case of waiting to the summer on that one.
Adam?
I'd largely agree. And, going off the back of yesterday's performance and the amount of chances that we missed, maybe another striker, especially if if Oumar Niasse is offloaded, Cenk Tosun's future's in a little bit of doubt as well. If those two were to leave, then I think we'd need a bit of a more experienced option. So I wouldn't be against the signing of a striker, but yeah, I agree with Bees. Central midfielder and a centre back should be the main priorities for me.
So that's centre back, centre mid, and centre forward. We suggest the entire spine of the team is lacking. We used the word spineless earlier, and yeah, it's absolutely right. Yerry Mina has been very, very good this season, but you always got your heart in your mouth a little bit. He looks like a man who's capable of getting injured, so quite frequently. And if he does get injured, there's very little, sort of in reserve to come in. So that's a priority. centre mid would have been a priority, but for the fact, like you say, Gbamin, I'm not sure quite where he's at yet with his recovery, but hopefully not too far away. Tom Davis, strangely not used at all yesterday, and then again Andre Gomez. So that's an area that possibly needs a little bit less sort of care and attention right now, even though we've just torn Schneiderlin and Sigurdsson to pieces. But yeah, forward line. To ask Dominic Calvert-Lewin to lead that line for the rest of the season. Is difficult. He has been very, very promising over the last few weeks. He has scored goals. I totally endorse what Carlo Ancelotti said about him. But it's a long season and he is still a young footballer who's still developing. So it is asking a lot to ask him to carry that burden of responsibility. Is Richarlison, a striker that can play off him? He looks okay on occasions, but we don't know. If Tosin and Niasse are moving on, we need another centre forward, another striker, definitely a goal scorer. They're the hardest players to attract, certainly in a January transfer window, although I know Cenk Tosin signed in a January. So it's a bit Marcel Brands again, earns his money, so tries to bring it. Actually, Niasse signed in January as well, didn't they? We've signed some bad ones in
yeah, which necessarily call them goal scorers though.
Yeah. Not backing Carlo to get the best out of Moise Keane then?
I don't know. I'm still torn on Moise Keane. I see him and I shake my head in disbelief sometimes because he sometimes can't do the basics, and yet he made an impression on New Year's Day at Man City. He did okay. How annoying was Steve McManaman? Were you there? You managed to have heard the commentary.
I've not heard this, no.
Moise Keane's got to do better than that. He did great to get on the end of that volley, and so it was a spectacular overhead kick and just put it wide. But all throughout that game, he was sort of having a pop at Everton. For a man who was an Evertonian as a kid, so for a long time. But I don't know. I'm not sure about Moise Keane still. I accept he's very, very young, and there's still a lot of development, a lot of settling, a lot of familiarising himself with this country and with this league to happen. And Ancelotti speaks highly of him and tried to sign him at Napoli. So yeah, hopefully there's a lot more development to come. But I'm still not seeing it at the moment. So no, I don't think he's be an answer short term. I'd like to see another striker brought in the medium term or immediately.
Is that the problem at the moment, Adam? That there is a lot of ifs and buts in this squad, isn't it? That you've got your Moise Keane, if Gbamin hits the ground running after his injury, if other people can kind of pick the form up, I don't think we've seen Luca Dina as best this season, perhaps not Jordan Pickford. I think there's probably still more to come from Yerry Mina, Mason Holgate. But, at the end of the day, it's up to Ancelotti and it's up to the players to kind of start getting that best out of themselves, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's the task that Carlo Ancelotti signed up for. I don't think he'll have been under any illusions about the scale of the task that's been presented to him. I think he wouldn't have been expecting what happened yesterday, but I think that probably that and the defeat to Man City as well, they probably went to prove to Ancelotti just how big the job in front of him is. It's going to be his toughest job in a long while to try and get Everton up to the level that not just fans deserve, but fans will expect, really. With the amount of money and the amount of quality that we know that we've got in this squad. Luca Dean was incredible last season and he hasn't reached those heights. As you say, Yerry Mina still has played really well this season, but you think he's still got a lot more to give. Spent a lot of money on Moise Keane, but when are we going to see the best out of him? He definitely needs to settle in this league still. Gbamin, I don't think we'll see the best out of him until next season after he's back from injury, because he's going to need time to settle. So there are a lot of extenuating factors to why Everton are in the position that they are, but that's the task that Carlo Ancelotti's got. That's why we've spent so much money to attract one of Europe's best managers. Now it's time for all the squad to knuckle down and prove to Ancelotti why they still deserve to be here.
If I can just throw one positive out there, and let's face it, there were a precious few there yesterday. The performance in two very, very difficult environments in recent times of Jordan Pickford. He went to Newcastle, where we know what happened last season, and yet looked an altogether more focused, more mature, more authoritative individual. And then again, at Anfield on Sunday, where he's had his own personal demons previously. And again, performed, one absolutely outstanding save from Divock Origi, which I think Origi might have been pulled offside, so had it, gone past him, but he didn't. It was a great save, but he performed with authority. His kicking wasn't great, I know, he was a bit too hasty at times, but, his handling of the ball, his marshalling of his defence. So, two difficult arenas, where he's had issues in the past and he's come through them both. I know it's only like clutching at straws, but that is one, slight positive that I took from that yesterday.
Some people did question Pickford for the goal, Is that something you'd...
No, it was just
I don't agree with that at all. Like it's gone in off the underside of the bar. I don't know how he's... No. I don't know how he's meant to get that.
Initially, I thought it was an own goal. I said to Phil, who was sat next to me, I said, I think that might be an Oggy, because I thought it hit the crossbar, hit him on the back and gone in. And then I saw it again, and no, it was absolutely postage stamp. And no criticism whatsoever levelled at him for that one.
What are your thoughts on, obviously there has been a little bit of talk about the goalkeeper bees. Are you still confident that Everton have got a long-term England number one on the hands?
Oh yeah, I've not got any issues with Jordan at all. I think the only issues, like Dave has alluded to, would be his mentality in the past there. Obviously those antics up at Newcastle and what happened in the derby. So no, ability-wise, and to be fair to him, I think if you're looking at his kicking yesterday, he was put under the cosh by some pretty lackadaisical back passes. It was almost like Everton were trying to tippy-tappy in their own penalty area at times. So no, I don't. He's certainly got a long way to go if you're talking about sort of comparisons with Everton's all-time greats like Neville Southall. But no, I hopefully Jordan's on the right tracks. No concerns in that respect.
It's funny actually talking tippy-tappy there, because there has been almost like a sea change in outlook in the space of a couple of weeks. So Duncan unashamedly, went direct, as quickly as possible, get the ball forward to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, let's try and press high up the pitch. And it worked. Carlo Ancelotti's come in and he's tried to revert more to a more methodical, sort of logical build-up from the back. Like you say, passing it around your own penalty area, and got to add your heart in your mouth at times yesterday, because they didn't seem capable of doing even the basics right. So either Carlo Ancelotti will learn very quickly that the quality of the players at his disposal perhaps aren't equipped to do that, or the players will realise, they've got to try and, sort of sink or swim with this system very, very quickly, otherwise they won't be there much longer. But yeah, changing times ahead.
It's going to be hard to earn total forgiveness for that performance, Adam, but with a run of fixtures like Brighton at home, West Ham away, Newcastle at home, Watford away, and Crystal Palace at home, before we enter another tough period, Carlo Ancelotti must surely be looking at these next 4 or 5 games now to earn some sort of redemption.
Well, yeah, you still look at how close the Premier League is at the minute, and 2 or 3 wins can really elevate you massively in this table the way it currently stands. So you look at fixtures like that, and after the start of the season we've had, I don't think we can take any games for granted at all. But considering the results that we got in December, like the win over Chelsea, draws with Arsenal and Man United, when could have easily turned them into wins as well. You've got to be targeting as many points as possible out of those games. I'd argue you should really be targeting 15 points out of those 5 games, and suddenly if you get that, you're probably pushing yourself back up into the European fight again. And then I think our fixtures after that get much tougher. But you've got to be aiming as high as possible now, because this is it. This is what our season is now. It's essentially, can we get ourselves back into that fight for Europe? If we can't, then it's just another season of no trophy, not even a real trophy run. Bit of a mid-table mediocrity, and it's another revamp in the summer. But there's a chance for these players to actually push us up into these European places, and that's what Ancelotti needs to be drilling in now. He was very clear after the match yesterday that he's like, right, we've got a week to prepare for this game now. I can finally get them on the training pitch and get some tactics into them, which hopefully will pay some dividends. Brighton at home. Brighton have been playing well under Graham Potter, but this is a game that Everton really should be winning.
He's 5 points above the relegation zone, but 6 points off 5th, I think it is. So, we are as mid-table as possible. Where do you think should be the aim for Everton this season? Do you think it should still be, we finished 8th last season?
Yeah. I think the way it's just a bizarre, beyond Liverpool, who are obviously running away with it and they don't even need to be. It's a strange division this year. Top, like you say, very little to choose between them. I think they've got to aim top half at least. Who knows whether they can push on for a European place. I mean, you could fully expect them to turn Brighton over on Saturday, and they better had to, but you expect them to do. But then, again, it's too little too late. I mean, it won't be any sort of redemption for what happened at Anfield. There's a there's a sequence of fixtures coming up that look favourable, but like as Adam said, I mean, they said that at the start of the season, and look what happened there. So, definitely can't take anything for granted, and they need to keep on getting those points on the board as quickly as possible, so you can actually have a bit, not relax, but look towards the business end of the season without having to sort of be concerned of what's over your shoulder.
The only thing that will redeem that yesterday will be beating Liverpool at Goodison in a match that matters. Say, for argument's sake, they need to win that game to clinch the title. Win that one. It's happened before when Wayne Clark scored. They were about to beat Leeds United's record of unbeaten matches from the start of the season, and came to Goodison in March, and Everton beat them to prevent them from doing that. You've got to beat a Liverpool side when it matters. So when it counts. Like at Anfield in a league game against a full strength team.
But it could also be, if as Adam says, we take 9, 12, 15 points out of those next 5 games, it could also be winning to keep ourselves in the hunt for a European place.
Yeah, I mean, that can change the mood very, very quickly, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Like you say, it is so concertina at the Premier League at the moment. 3 wins in succession, and suddenly you're thinking, yeah, there's a possibility there. That then gives the side confidence to take into games against those tough run of fixtures that you talked about, and hopefully perform better than them. But for that to happen, we've got to start winning these games. And when you read them out, my initial reaction was, Watford, new manager, that's tough. So Brighton, they've been awkward for a lot of teams this season. You're looking at it from a more negative viewpoint than you should do, as probably what the players were doing yesterday when they saw that team sheet, looking at it negatively rather than positively. Maybe I need to be, change my mentality and my way of thinking. It is just difficult.
Do you think European football might be a step too far this season, Adam?
I don't think there's any reason for it to be a step too far. I think, as I said, the amount of money we've spent on this squad and the amount of quality that we do have in these players, now with a world-class manager at the helm, we've got all the ingredients there to really push on for a European fight. It's not as if the rest of the Premier League have been running away with it. There's nobody who's really staking a massive claim for these European places at the minute. It needs somebody to come and do it. So there's no reason to suggest that Everton can't. But, going off what has already been put in this season, if they carry on the way they have done this season, then it will be a step too far. But this needs to be the catalyst now for a bit of a change in this squad's mentality more than anything else. So I think they should be aiming for European football.
Well, I think we can leave what's been a quite negative podcast on a nice positive note there. Thank you very much for returning. Thank you very much for listening, and we will be back later on in the week to preview that visit of Brighton at Goodison Park at the weekend. We've been the Royal Blue Podcast. Thank you very much.
The Royal Blue Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.